With two more, Christian McCaffrey now is tied with Marshall Faulk in running backs receiving touchdowns with 36. They lead the NFL all time. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL Top 10s for Wednesday. My name's Ernie Jennings, and we're getting started late today because of this computer situation, a glitch. I don't know what it is. I tried to figure it out, but I'm having to use my laptop to record this video versus my phone. I use the phone every day. I don't know what happened today. So we're going to have to go with that. It's not as good a quality. The picture quality is not the same, and the setup isn't exactly what I want, but it's what we're going to have to work with. So beyond that, hope everybody's enjoying their Christmas Eve and getting ready for Christmas. And if you're like us, we're going to do a lot of stuff on Christmas Eve tonight. We'll be quite busy, so I need to get this going. A lot of stuff to do today, and then tomorrow. No podcast tomorrow, but there are 3 games tomorrow on Christmas. So on Friday, I'll have a podcast, hopefully back to the way I normally do it, once I figure out what the glitch was. And we'll cover those 3 games from Thursday. So that should be good. All right, well, let's get started on this episode of Just the Stats NFL Top 10s for Wednesday. And we're going to wrap up the games that we hadn't finished yet. And we'll start with the Pittsburgh Steelers visiting the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions just needed this game, and looked like they actually won it. They ended up losing 29-24. They go down 2 times. They score a touchdown only to be called back for pass interference, offensive pass interference. How bad is that? The one with the rookie, I think he was a tight end, just ran right into the defender. I mean, it was patently obvious that it was a pass interference. The next one was crazy, was even crazy. Would have been crazier than the play where Chicago won that game. But I think it was St. Brown caught the ball but couldn't get in the end zone. He tossed it back. Goff picked it up, ran it in for a touchdown. And they called it a touchdown, but they called it offensive pass interference. No time left on the clock. Game's over. So what a game that was, too. So looking at some of the numbers in this game real quick, it was Pittsburgh really kind of dominated the game, though. 481 yards of offense to 361 for Detroit. And holy cow, this is the big stat right here. Rushing yards for Detroit Lions. You've got Gibbs and Montgomery. 15 yards. 15 yards rushing versus 230 for Pittsburgh. There's your game. They dominated in the running game here. Let's look at some of these stats. Aaron Rodgers, not bad. 27 completions on 41 attempts. 266 yards, 6.5 yards an attempt, 1 TD, 92.1 quarterback rating. Not too bad. Off. This is crazy. 34 completions on 54 attempts. He threw the ball 54 times. I guess they just gave up on the run. 164 yards passing, 6.7 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 101.2 quarterback rating. Pretty decent, but just not good enough to win. He was sacked 3 times in the game. Now, in the running department, Jaylen Warren, huge game. 2 big runs for touchdowns. One was 45. The other one was also over 40. He had 14 carries for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. So big game for him. Kenny Gainwell came in with 9 carries for 50 yards. Now in the receiving department, this is where Gainwell gains all that yardage back. He had 78 yards on 5 catches to lead the Steelers in receiving as well with those 78 yards. So he ended up with a total of 128 yards himself. Warren had 2 catches for 8 yards. So He had a whole total of 151 yards. So the running backs had well over 300 yards of their total offense. Now for the Lions, David Montgomery, 4 carries, 14 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs, 7 carries, 2 yards. Now this game is close. They just did not want to run it. I guess they felt like they couldn't run it and they didn't try. I mean, they had a total of 12 carries in a game. They lost, but in a game where they weren't that far behind. I mean, at halftime, it's 10-10. They had a safety. By the end of the third quarter, it's still 12-10 Steelers beating the Lions. And yet the Lions are still throwing the ball and not even trying to run. It was crazy. So they need to read the stat that I keep hearing all the time is anytime the Lions, and this has been true the entire season, anytime the Lions rush as a team for less than 100 yards, they lose. Well, they did that this time and they lost. So maybe they want to rethink their strategy. And because of that, the way they passed it a lot, time of possession, Steelers 34 minutes, 26 minutes for the Lions. When you don't run it, you can't control the clock either. So no running there. Now in the receiving department, like I said, Gainwell led for the Steelers. For Detroit, it was Jahmyr Gibbs. Did all right there, 10 catches, 66 yards. So I guess they figured let's just have him kind of do these little screen passes and count that as a run play for them. 1 touchdown receiving for Jahmyr Gibbs. So he ended up with, 68 yards, but it's still terrible. Jamison Williams, as far as wide receivers, led the team with 5 catches for 70 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4 catches, 54 yards, but not targeted 9 times. So only 4 catches in that amount of time. I'm trying to say 4 receptions on 9 targets. So less than half the time he was catching the ball. All right, now let's look at some numbers in this game. Well, Jared Goff did throw 3 touchdown passes in this game. So he was, for the Detroit Lions, in the top 10 for the season, passing touchdowns in a single season. He came into the game in 6th. With 3 more, he jumps all the way into tie for 3rd with Matthew Stafford, who did it in 2015, and Scott Mitchell, who did it in 1995. So he's got 32 touchdown passes. Now Matthew Stafford has the record with 41, the Detroit Lions record, that is. All right, now in receptions for the Detroit Lions, well, Amon-Ra St. Brown only had 4, but that's how many he needed to move into the top 10 all-time in receptions in a season for the Detroit Lions. So he now has 98, which ties him with 10th, with Mike Furry, who did it in 2006, 98 times, 98 receptions this season. He has a chance to move up the list a little bit. He's been pretty consistent, actually. The last 2 years, he had 119 and 115. He won't make it that far, probably. And then in 2022, he had 106. So 4 years in a row, Amon-Ra St. Brown will have 100-plus receptions, most likely. Only needs 2 more to make that. The Detroit Lions have only 8 times has a player had 100 or more receptions in the history of this team. From the 30s to today, only 8 times. Make that 9 after this next week, probably, with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, despite how bad the game was for Jahmyr Gibbs overall, that 1 receiving touchdown helped him to move out of a tie for 5th with Billy Sims, who played in the 80s. They both had 47 total touchdowns for the Detroit Lions in a career. So with 1 more, Jahmyr Gibbs is now into 4th place all-time in career all touchdowns for the Detroit Lions with 48. So he's had a good career. Amon-Ra St. Brown's got 43 himself, which is good enough for 6th. So they got 2. The Detroit Lions are an amazing team. They got some really good players, and yet they're having a terrible season. 8-7. That's fighting to get into the playoffs. Really something else. Now, moving on to our next game, which is the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Houston Texans. This was a much tighter game than anybody gave it credit for. Everybody thought Houston would just wipe out the Texans, and they didn't. Houston did win it 23-21 in Houston. Very close game. And in fact, the only reason, offensively, Houston scored fewer points than the Raiders did. They got one of their touchdowns on a Darryl Stingley. In fact, their first touchdown on a Darryl Stingley interception that he ran in 31 yards for a touchdown. That was kicked them off with a lead right away, and you thought, okay, well, this is going to be a wipeout for Houston, and never was. Raiders stayed in this game and almost won it, losing 23-21. All right, let's look at some of the stats in this game. Not a lot of offense. Houston, 270 yards of offense, 315 for the Raiders. Now, it was a big game for Ashton Jeanty. This is a game everybody's been waiting for from him, this rookie, and who gets hit behind the line of scrimmage more than any other running back. Before he even has a chance to get the offense to the line, he's already being hit by some defender. So he's had a offensive line that really needs to improve it coming up in this next season. But in the passing game, we'll get to that, and then we'll get to Ashton Jeanty. Geno Smith, 16 completions on 23 attempts, 201 yards. That's not bad, 8.7 yards an attempt. 2 touchdowns, but that one interception was returned for a touchdown, which ultimately was the game changer. He had 107.3 quarterback rating. Now, this is against Houston, who's supposed to have one of the best defenses, and he did pretty well, only sacked 3 times in the game. C.J. Stroud, on the other hand, threw the ball 35 times, only 23 completions on that, which isn't a bad percentage, but only 187 yards. That's 5.3 yards per attempt, pretty low. 1 touchdown, quarterback rating of 88.6. His longest pass was 24 yards in the entire game. All right, looking at the Raiders now in the rushing department, Ashton Jeanty, 24 carries, 128 yards, 5.3 yards a carry, 51-yard touchdown run. This is the big run everybody's been looking for. So he had that one touchdown for 53 yards. But also, he had one catch, only one catch, but it was 60 yards. That was a touchdown as well, a 60-yard touchdown catch. So if you're only going to get one reception, 60 yards for a touchdown is pretty good. So he ended up totaling out with 188 yards of offense. That's by far his best game this year. Now, for Houston, our Jordan came in and was the main running back in this game. Chubb was a backup. Chubb was 6 for 33, but Jordan had 15 carries, 53 yards, so 3 yards a carry, 3.5 yards a carry. They ran the ball 26 times, Houston did, for only 83 yards, 3.2 yards a carry. Not too much there. And in fact, out of that 83 yards, one was a 30-yard run. So you're talking about 25 carries for 53 yards. So basically 2 yards a carry. So not much of a running game. The passing game was weak. But, you're playing the Raiders, who are now 2-13. You expect to do better against that team. They don't have that great of an offense. In the receiving department, Brock Bowers, 5 catches, 33 yards. Kind of a bummer there. He did have a touchdown, though, so that helped out. Like I said, Ashton Jeanty had the one catch for 60 yards for a touchdown. That was the other one. No one had more than 5 targets in this game. That was Bowers and Trey Tucker. And Trey Tucker and Jack Bech led the team in yardage. Well, actually, Ashton Jeanty did without run catch, but Tucker and Bech had 43 yards apiece. So, pretty good percentage, 16 receptions for 201 yards. That's pretty good distance as far as yards per catch. All right, let's look at some numbers in here. Now, Max Crosby, he's been the bright spot for this team. He had, in this game, Let me look. He had 2 tackles for loss in this game. He now has 28 tackles for loss this season, which puts him at 5th all-time in NFL history for tackles for loss in a single season with 28. The only 2 people ahead of him are J.J. Watt, who did it 3 times. J.J. Watt has 3 of the top 4 spots. And now Myles Garrett, who's playing this season, who has 32 tackles for loss. But Max Crosby has actually closed the gap on him. He's only 4 behind Myles Garrett. This is an incredible season to have 2 players in the top 5 now in tackles for loss in a single season. Pretty impressive. I mentioned this before, but in 2012, Von Miller had 28, while J.J. Watt had 39. That's the only other year where you had 2 players from the same year. Now, this is a stat that's been around not as long as some other stats, but still quite impressive season that Max Crosby's had this year. Now, for Houston, C.J. Stroud had 1 touchdown pass. He now has 59 touchdown passes in his career with the Houston Texans, which is good enough to put him into a tie for 3rd with David Carr, who played in the early 2000s. They both have 59 now. Matt Schaub leads the team with 124. So it'll be Stroud's not even quite halfway to catching Schaub. Also on the defense, another great defensive player, Will Anderson, has been doing quite well in tackles for loss himself, even though not that as many as Max Crosby. But Will Anderson had another tackle for loss. So in his career now for the Houston Texans, he has 43, which puts him into tie for 5th place now with 43 tackles for loss in his career. He's only been with the team since 2023, so pretty impressive early in his career how well he's played. He's been so good in tackles for loss and in sacks as well. And speaking of sacks, Will Anderson had a sack, as did Danielle Hunter. They've both been really good. And Danielle Hunter's only been on the team since 2024. He's already in the top 10, and so is Will Anderson. They both had 1 sack. Danielle Hunter stayed in 7th with 25. But with the sack, Will Anderson jumps Jadeveon Clowney. Sorry, I'm trying to talk too fast. Clowney was with the team from 2014 to 2018. He had 29 sacks for Houston Texans. Will Anderson now has 29 and a half to move into 4th place all time. And it'll probably be 2 or 3 more seasons before he moves into the top 3. Mario Williams is 3rd with 53, and J.J. Watt leads the Houston Texans with 101. But Will Anderson is now in 4th place. Danielle Hunter is in 7th place. So those 2 players on this team make this defense so good. All right. Let's move on to our next game. This is New England Patriots versus the Baltimore Ravens. Another team. Well, New England is in the playoffs, but they're fighting for number 1 spot in the playoffs for the AFC, while Baltimore Ravens were trying to keep pace with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who did win. Baltimore Ravens couldn't do it. They lose 28-24. Jackson went out of this game, got hit in the back and had back pain, so he was out in this game. They lose this game. New England Patriots came back in this game. There was tied 10-10. Baltimore pulled ahead 17-13 at 3rd quarter, but Patriots put up 15 in the 4th, and Ravens just couldn't keep pace. They lose 28-24. Now, some of the numbers in this game, wow. New England had 374 yards of offense. Ravens, the fact that they're in this game was impressive because they only had 159 yards of offense in this game. No, I'm sorry. They had 330. My bad. 330 yards of offense. New England had 453. So big difference there. I'm looking at the wrong numbers here. Running department, Derrick Henry has been good. He's really showing up lately. Unfortunately, it hasn't been helping the team win games, but he's played appears to me he's got a little bit more juice going at the end of the season. So looking at the numbers, Drake May, 31 completions on 44 attempts. So a lot of passes in this game, 380 yards. Obviously, they're trying to catch up in the end there. 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, a quarterback rating of 102.5. Now, in this game, Lamar Jackson was 7 for 10, 100 yards, 102.5 quarterback rating before he went out. Tyler Huntley came in. He went 9 for 10. That's really good. 65 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, sacked only once, had a quarterback rating of 93.8. So he played fairly well coming in. Just they couldn't get it in the end zone. For the Patriots, Travion Henderson didn't play much. Stevenson had 8 carries, 51 yards, which is pretty good. They didn't run it a lot. Drake May ran it actually more than anybody else, 10 carries for 25 yards, so not many yards. Stevenson had the 1 touchdown. Now for the Ravens, Derrick Henry, 18 carries, 128 yards. That's over 7 yards a carry. He had 2 touchdowns again. He's moving up the list all-time NFL-wise in touchdowns rushing. So he led the team there. In receiving, Stephon Diggs had a big game. He's been showing up lately, and it's hard for the Patriots. I mean, it's good for them as a team. If you're in fantasy, it's hard to know who's going to be the leading receiver. This time it was Stephon Diggs, 9 catches, 138 yards. He was targeted 10 times. Matt Collins 9 times, so he was second, but he had 7 catches for 69 yards. Really impressive game for Drake May. He's been playing well, and I still, though, think he would come in second behind Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford threw for well over 400 yards and did better, in fact. Now, for Ravens, Zay Flowers led the team with 7 catches for 84 yards. There's only 166 yards of passing here, so he had half of those, just over half of the yards there. DeAndre Hopkins came in with 4 catches for 41 yards in this game. All right, looking at some of the numbers, Drake May was sacked 3 times in this game. He now has been sacked this season 46 times, which is good enough, bad enough, however you want to look at it, to move into the 5th spot all-time in quarterbacks sacks for the New England Patriots in a single season with 46 now. Matt Castle's in 4th with 48, so very good, or 47 that is, so a very good chance that he passes him. Tony Easton has a record with 59. You surely don't want to see Drake May break that in the next 2 games. That's a lot of times to be sacked. So in this game for the Baltimore Ravens, this season now, Derrick Henry moved into, he was 13th this season going into the game with 1,125 yards. He had 128 more, which bumps him all the way up into 8th all-time in rushing yards in a single season for the Baltimore Ravens with 1,253 yards. So he's really had another good season. Last year he had over 1,900. This year he's on pace to get over 13, maybe 1,400 yards. He's really proven a little bit better, I think, than Saquon Barkley on this bounce-back year from the previous year. Both of them had such good years last year. Now, with those 2 rushing touchdowns this season, Derrick Henry now has 12, which puts him into a tie with Ray Rice and Willis McGahee, all time for the Baltimore Ravens in a single season in 4th spot. Derrick Henry holds the record, which he set last year, was 16. He'd need 4 more in the next 2 games. Not out of the realm of possibility, but I'm not sure he's going to get there. But he is at number 4 now. So he's got the number 1 spot and currently number 4 spot with Gus Edwards with 13 and Jamal Lewis with 14, the next 2 players up for him to catch. Zay Flowers had 7 catches. He was 21st in most receptions in a single season for the Ravens. With 7 more receptions, he actually jumps all the way into a tie for 8th with Ray Rice again. Ray Rice in 2009 had 78 receptions. Zay Flowers now has 78 receptions himself. to move into a tie for 8th. Believe it or not, for the Baltimore Ravens, only 2 times in their history has a receiver had more than 100 receptions. Mark Andrews did it in 2021 with 107, and Derek Mason in 2007 had 103. That's it. Boy, I'd have to look through, but I don't think there's any other team that only has 2 players that's ever made it to 100 receptions. I may be wrong. Actually, I think the Seattle Seahawks had 2, and they only had 100 apiece. That's right, because I think Smith Najigba is going to break that record and move it beyond 100 receptions on the number. All right, now in another category, career-wise for the Ravens, and this is in rushing touchdowns in the career for the Baltimore Ravens. Derrick Henry now has 28, which puts him into 5th all-time in that category for the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson's in 3rd right now with 35. Jamal Lewis holds the record with 45. So I'm not sure, it just depends on how long Derrick Henry is going to be around. He would have a chance to break that record, but I don't know what his plans are as far as retirement goes. He's still playing at a very high level, but I don't know, how long he wants to continue that. Another stat, Zay Flowers in receptions on a career level now, with those 7 receptions, now has 229 receptions in his career with the Baltimore Ravens, which is good enough for 6th all-time on that team. Mark Andrews holds the record with 478, but he's been on the team since 2018. Zay Flowers has only been there since 2023. So he has a good chance to ultimately pass Mark Andrews. He's definitely their best receiver. I wouldn't think they'd want to let him go after his rookie contract's up. All right, this is the final stat for the Ravens. A lot of stats for this team. And too bad it was in a losing effort on their part if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan. But this is in all touchdowns total. Derrick Henry now has 30 total touchdowns for the Baltimore Ravens, which is good enough to put him into tie for 7th all-time in that category. Mark Jackson 6th with 35, which is good enough for a tie for 5th. And Mark Andrews, again, leads the team all-time in touchdowns with 57. It's one of the lower numbers you'll find. Other teams have anywhere from 80s to over 100. But still, he does lead the team in quite a few categories, receiving categories, touchdown categories, a lot. All right, let's get to our last game. This was the Monday night game, and between the San Francisco 49ers coming into Indianapolis to play the Colts. And they came out with a victory pretty handily in a way. It was close to start with. Indianapolis made it close through the halftime, but they just lost momentum. They couldn't keep it going, and they ended up losing 48-27. San Francisco stays in the hunt. They're now 11-4. The Indianapolis Colts' hopes are fading drastically. They need all kinds of help. They need to win out. They do play the Jaguars, but that doesn't matter. Jaguars are in the playoffs, but Colts need to win out, and they need some help. I don't know if they're going to get it, though. The chances are slim, like I said. All right, so the 49ers win it 48-27, and they just blew them out in the second half. I mean, at halftime, the Colts were winning 17-14. Oh, no, they weren't. They were losing 24-17, but it was close. But San Francisco just kept piling on, and they ended up winning it big. Now, in this game, 49ers had 440 yards of offense. Colts had 312. Looking at some of the numbers, Brock Purdy had a really good game. 25 completions on 34 attempts, 295 yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, had 5 touchdown passes, 1 interception, quarterback rating of 126.8. So big game for him. Compared to that game a few weeks ago where he was throwing the ball interceptions almost every time he went out there for a pass, it seemed like. I think he had 3 or 4 interceptions in that game. But he looked really good in this one. Phillip Rivers didn't play too bad and actually threw the ball down the field a little bit farther than he did the previous week. 23 completions on 35 attempts, 277 yards. That's almost 8 yards an attempt. Not bad. 2 touchdowns, but he did have an interception. Only sacked twice. Had a quarterback rating of 97. So really not bad in this game. But they just couldn't get it in the end zone and to keep pace. Now, Christian McCaffrey had a good game. One of his better games. He's been averaging less than 4 yards an attempt. But in this game, he had 21 carries, 117 yards. So that's over 5.5 yards a carry. So much better game for him. For Colts, Jonathan Taylor, another game. He's losing ground. I don't know yet. I'll have to look at the numbers. But Cook could catch him, honestly. Probably did. Jonathan Taylor had 16 carries for 46 yards, less than 3 yards a carry. Did have a touchdown, though. But really has not been up to the same level. And obviously, there's not any fear of the quarterback, really, so there's a lot of pressure on Taylor, and a lot of the defense is focusing a little bit more on him. Now, in the receiving department, George Kittle had a big game until he went out late sometime in the fourth quarter. They didn't need him to stay in. He kind of looked like he twinged his ankle a little bit, tweaked it. He had 7 catches, 115 yards, a touchdown. He really looked unstoppable. Christian McCaffrey had 6 catches, only 29 yards, though, but 2 touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. What a big game he had. No touchdowns rushing, but 2 receiving. He has been pretty impressive for this team. Juwan Jennings had 5 catches, 71 yards, and a touchdown as well. All right, let's look at some of the numbers in this game, and we'll start with Christian McCaffrey. With those 117 yards, moves him up into 10th place all-time in career rushing yards for the San Francisco 49ers. He now has 3,446. Looking at Christian McCaffrey again. Now, this is top 10 NFL running backs receiving touchdowns in their career. With 2 more, Christian McCaffrey now is tied with Marshall Faulk in running backs receiving touchdowns with 36. They lead the NFL all time. So 1 more, Christian McCaffrey breaks the record in that category. Now, for the Colts, Jonathan Taylor did have a rushing touchdown. So this season now he has 17, which is good enough to be second all time for the Colts in rushing touchdowns in a single season with 17. He set the record himself in 2021 with 18, so he only needs 1 more to tie, 2 more to break his own record, which he set, like I said, in 2021. Also, for the Colts, they've got 4. Buckner hasn't been playing. 4 defenders in tackles for loss in the top 10. That's just amazing. 4 players. And like I said, DeForest Buckner hasn't even been playing. Buckner has 57 to be 3rd all time. Grover Stewart has 45. That's tied for 5th. And Tyquan Lewis has 32, which is 10th. Quit Pay had 1 in this game. He was at 36, which was 8th, but he got 1 more and now has 37, which ties him for 7th all time in tackles for loss in a career for the Indianapolis Colts. So pretty impressive defense when they're all out there playing, you would think. All right. A look at those numbers. Now, let's take a look at the standings real quick, and we'll go through that. All right. New England Patriots. We'll start with the AFC. 12-3. Buffalo Bills are right behind them. So really the Patriots, I don't know the tiebreaker situation. I do know that in the division, the Patriots are 3-1. Buffalo Bills are 3-2. So the New England Patriots have an edge there. In their last 2 games, if they win them out, their division games, New England Patriots would have the tiebreaker as well. Buffalo Bills are 11-4. New England Patriots 12-3. Buffalo Bills are right on their tail. Looking at the AFC North, with a win by Pittsburgh, they pulled 2-game lead on the Baltimore Ravens. So they pretty much are close to eliminating the Ravens. Now, obviously, the Steelers could lose both those games, their next two games, and go 9-8. Baltimore Ravens win, they're 9-8. And then it comes into tiebreaker situations. So we'll see what happens there. AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars clinched a playoff spot because the Indianapolis Colts lost. So they're in the playoffs. Now, where they are, whether they win the division or as a wild card, that's still up in the air. They're 11-4. Houston Texans are 10-5. So basically, the Jaguars have to keep winning. And unless Houston Texans happen to lose a game, they're going to have to keep winning to stay ahead of the Houston Texans. I'm talking about the Jaguars, but very close between the two of them. Indianapolis Colts are 8-7. The best they're going to go is 10-7. So they really need a lot of help. And they're only, really, honestly, their only hope, I don't even know how they can get in the playoffs. There's going to be three teams. One's going to be the Bills. They're in, at least, as a wild card. The Chargers are in. And, okay, so the Colts, Houston Texans need to lose both their games. They would end up 10-7. Indianapolis Colts win both their games. They're 10-7. And then depending on tiebreakers, they could beat out the Houston Texans. That's the only chance they have. And that is a pretty slim chance, to be honest with you. I do not see the Houston Texans losing their next two games. But the Texans do play the Chargers this week. So that's a pretty tough team. So that might give the Colts a little bit of a hope. But the Colts play the Jaguars, so that's going to be a tough game for them as well. Now in the AFC West, Denver Broncos clinched the playoff spot, as did the Los Angeles Chargers. Denver Broncos are 12-3. The Chargers are 11-4. So now it just is a matter of who wins the division. Chargers have tiebreaker category pretty much locked up. They're 5-0. The worst they're going to go is 5-1. The Broncos right now in the division are 3-1. So the Chargers have a good chance in that area. So the Broncos can't afford to lose if they want to win their conference or their division. And still, they're holding out hope, obviously, for the number one seed because the Patriots are 12-3, the Broncos are 12-3. So they're both holding out, trying to win that number one seed position as well. The Chargers with 11-4, the Jaguars 11-4, and the Bills 11-4 have slim opportunity, I think, to get the number one seed, but they're still mathematically in contention for that spot. Now, in the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles are 10-5. They've wrapped up their their division, the NFC East. Dallas Cowboys can't catch them with their loss. They're out of it. They've been eliminated. Everybody in the NFC, other than the Eagles, have been eliminated from playoff contention. In the NFC North, Chicago Bears are in the playoffs. They're 11-4. Green Bay Packers are 9-5-1. Detroit Lions are 8-7. And the Minnesota Vikings at 7-8 are eliminated. Detroit Lions at 8-7 need a lot of help. They can still finish the season at 10-7. Green Bay Packers could lose their games, go 9-7-1 to be a game behind as far as playoff spot. Now the Bears just need to win one more game and they wrap up the division. They could go 11-6. The Green Bay Packers could go 11-5-1, but that's requiring the Bears to lose two games and the Packers to win two games. We'll see what happens there, but Bears are in a very good spot here. The South, this is Carolina Panthers have taken control of this division. They're 8-7. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 7-8. They play each other the last game of the season. So the Buccaneers really need to win this Sunday. Go 8-8. They need some help from the Panthers as well. Only one team, obviously, from NFC South is going to the playoffs. The Falcons and Saints are already eliminated. Now, in the NFC West, Cardinals are out of it, but the Rams, the 49ers, and the Seahawks are all already in the playoffs. It's just a matter of whether they're winning the division or a wild card team. The Seattle Seahawks right now control this. They're 12-3. The 49ers and the Rams are 11-4. And boy, how big was that game between the Seahawks and the Rams. The Seahawks pulled it out because going into the game, the Rams were first. And with a loss, the Rams dropped from first to third. They're now behind the 49ers because in the division, the Rams are 3-2. The 49ers are 4-1. So the Seattle Seahawks are 12-3. They're 3-2 in the division. So right now, the 49ers, as far as division play goes, has the tiebreaker. So what they need is Seattle to lose another game, and the 49ers actually have a chance to win this division. And so do the Rams. Whoever wins out, I think, is going to win this division. So what a interesting division that is. We've got some divisions where two bad teams, like the NFC South and the AFC North. You got just two teams. Only one team's going to make it. And even so, their records aren't going to be that great. All right. A lot of good games coming up. Like I said, games on Thursday, on Christmas Day, there's 3 games. Now, if you don't have Netflix, you'll have to find a way to watch that 2 of those games. That's where they're going to be showing, which is kind of sad if you don't have Netflix. But hopefully you can figure out a way to watch those games, or if it's in your market, obviously you'll get to watch the game as well. And then there's games on Saturday, so keep an eye out for those as well. So we got a lot of NFL football, and a lot of it's huge games. And equally huge games if you're in the losing column, if you've already been eliminated and you're now looking at where you're going to end up in the draft. You know, whether you get the number 1 spot or not. And for a few teams, they want that spot because they need a quarterback. And I don't care what they say about the quarterbacks this year. One of them's probably going to go number 1 because there's so many teams that need a new quarterback. All right, well, that's a wrap. Appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe. You can find this podcast on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL. And sorry about the screw up. I don't know what happened here with this podcast, but with the camera situation and the microphone situation, but I'll try to figure it out. But again, like I said, I appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe, as I said. Hope you have a Merry Christmas. And that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL Top 10s for Wednesday. I'll see you on Friday. Merry Christmas.